Welcome everyone to the JB Media Digital Drop-In. We are so glad to have you joining us today. I know August is a busy time of year for everybody while we're taking some time off and hopefully enjoying the summer. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited about this topic. And for me, like I mentioned earlier, as we were talking about the poll, I know that a lot of different companies and organizations have been evolving to discover that there are both B2C and B2B customer bases that they could be serving with their products and services. So I think historically speaking, from a business perspective, we've often seen, that we fall on one side of the aisle or the other. But as the world has become more technological and things have modernized in a lot of different ways, we see that even traditionally B2C customers or companies can often serve B2B customers as well as B2C customers. So we're going to talk a lot about that. But yeah, so like I said, I'm really excited to talk about B2B marketing because I feel like not only is it something that I've traditionally worked in and lots of people I know have traditionally worked in, but more and more businesses and organizations are seeing opportunities to provide products and services that can be offered to larger groups, larger organizations, and larger companies. So I feel like the B2B conversation is becoming more relevant every day. Also, I want to remind everybody this morning that we will be recording this and sharing a copy of that recording after the fact, as well as a copy of my slide deck. So we will be talking about that or sending that out later on after we complete today's webinar. You'll usually receive it by tomorrow morning. So if you don't remember everything, that's okay. You'll get a copy of all of this. So I want to start, before we jump into our conversation with Sarah Yerke today, I want to talk a little bit just about what I said about the B2B versus B2C marketing strategies. And I've created just an overview for especially those of you who are already working in the B2B world, some things maybe to hopefully pique your interest and help you think about how you're executing your digital marketing, especially your content marketing. But for those of you who are maybe new to the B2B conversation, I really want to encourage you to take some of this information back to your desk later and really think about, if you're planning to open a market of business to business customers, some of these pieces of advice I think are super useful. And I want to give a shout out to HubSpot because, as usual, they are an amazing provider of information around this topic. And I can see Sarah Yerke nodding her head. We all rely a great deal on them for their insights and the different sort of pieces of data that they share about the business to business world. So just to clarify for everybody, when we say B2B versus B2C, we're talking about business to business versus business to consumer. And essentially, really, the difference is that in the B2B world, we're not just focusing on individual people as customers, right? We're really thinking about organizations, companies, larger groups of people that need products and services. Whereas when you're working in the B2C world, you're pretty much focused on individuals as your customers. And when we look at the difference between marketing to these two sort of segments of the world, I think there's some pretty clear differences between them. And again, I give HubSpot a shout out for really organizing this in a way that I think makes it easier to understand. But here you can see, when we look at goals, purchase motivations, and the drivers behind people who are buying products and services, when we look at the B2B world, we just see that a lot of the personal emotion is taken out of the sales process, right? And really, we tend to be thinking more from a bigger picture about the company that we work for or the organization that we work for. And we're really thinking about how we can provide products and services that have clear, direct, quantifiable value, right? So in the B2C world, we talk a lot about the emotions of people, how we're tapping into that. I still think that that matters in the B2B world, but I think we have to just think about the fact that people are approaching their purchases as if it's their job, rather than approaching their purchases the way they might if they're just on Amazon shopping for things, right? So you can see there's more ROI, efficiency, and expertise required. There's got to be a clearer discussion about the financial incentives behind what people are buying. B2B products and services are actually typically higher in cost in a lot of ways. And then customers really want to be educated when they're buying from the B2B perspective. So they really want to understand their options in more detail. They probably want to talk to a number of providers before they settle on the company that they choose. And then when we look at the customer journey, we also see there's some difference here, because a lot of times B2B buyers or B2B customers, they don't just make the decision on their own in the moment. Some business owners do. They can just sort of sign a contract and move on. But a lot of times, even the business owners themselves or the C-level executives are having conversations with the rest of their team, right? So that really adjusts the customer journey. The back and forth might be quite a bit more. There might be more information requested so that they can take it back and present it to the team of people that they work with, or even their decision makers. So recently I was on the end of a B2B discussion where they wanted me to be the customer. And I kept having to say to them, I don't get to make this decision in a silo. I have to have the information. I have to be able to present it to my business partner. Then I have to come back and give you an answer. And so, I had to really assert to them that I needed more time than us just talking by email for me to say yes to the situation. And a lot of times we see that in the B2C world, the business to consumer world, sometimes people are looking for long-term relationships. They're looking to build out, a sort of knowledge of a business where they might buy multiple products, but that's not always the case. Sometimes people are just shopping around, they buy something, and then that's it. They're pretty much gone, right? Whereas I think in the B2B world, we find a lot of times, and I'm sure Sarah Yerke will share a little bit about this, that once you make a relationship with a customer, they are likely to come back to you over and over because of the relationship that you've built. So that longevity becomes a much bigger part, I think, of how we're planning our sales processes and how we are connecting with people on the B2B side of things. There are a few things in digital marketing that I just want to highlight as really key to success. And this I just wanted to talk about briefly because I feel like there's so many options in digital marketing. And if you're in the B2B world, where should you be focusing your energy? I think the first thing is email marketing. Most business-to-business companies are building an email list, whether that's through their newsletter or it's through their CRM, their customer relationship management tool. And so I know for myself with the JB Media Institute, we're very B2B focused. We really don't sell to the B2C world at all. And so for us, our email list has been a core component of our success, right? Building that list regularly, engaging that list at a deeper level, and really having a long-term relationship with the people on our list matters quite a bit. And so you can see 83% of B2B companies are using email newsletters, and 40% of them are saying their newsletters are the most critical part of their content marketing success. So it means that for a lot of B2B companies, email is at the very top of their list of things that they're doing. So I think one of the biggest things about a B2B list is making sure that it's an engaged list, that people are opening the emails. It would be better in my mind to remove people who haven't opened emails in a year or 2 years than it would be to keep them on the list and then have that engagement dropping lower and lower and lower. So that's one thing I think we can all really focus on, right? Is how do we clean our lists? Even if your list is smaller rather than larger, truly having more people open the emails is actually what matters, right? We really don't want to have lists where lots of people are ignoring what we're saying in a general sense. And also, I think there's a lot of value from an email perspective in really listening to the needs of your customers and designing your email marketing for them specifically. So don't make it up, even though we're all creative. It's like, don't just make up what you think should be in the newsletter. Don't just copy what you see other people doing. Really, if you can, talk to your customers and find out what value you can really bring through your emails. I also think your email marketing is directly connected to your website. So it's incredibly important that you be building a website that is really usable, really fast, accessible, preferably. I think a lot of us in the business world have to start talking about accessibility for people with disabilities and making sure that our websites are up to par with the latest standards. Laws are literally changing as we speak and have been for the last few years. So it's going to be increasingly important on both the federal and the state level to be aware of accessibility and what's required for making sure that your website can be accessed by anybody, regardless of their physical capability. And then I think your website has to be educational in a lot of ways for your B2B customers and prospects. And you want to make sure that you're updating your website with content, and we want that content to be super useful and valuable. And this leads me to my second point, which is really thinking about thought leadership and how that plays into your digital marketing. And to me, thought leadership is just influencer marketing from B2B companies, right? So there's a lot of connections between thought leaders and influencers, but thought leadership exists more in the business to business world. And I think really what thought leadership comes down to is having content online, having a great website that is establishing your authority and your credibility, that's making educational information available to people in long form, in downloadable form, in video form, so that whether people want to read or they want to share something with their team or they want to listen to something you're talking about, I think it's really valuable to think about how your website becomes this kind of content hub for things that are really trustworthy. And thanks, Trinity. I'm so glad you figured it out. I also think that when you're working on thought leadership, you open up a lot of opportunities to establish partnerships with other people in the field that share your audiences, and to really grow your reach and engagement by connecting with those partners. So that is doing podcasts, doing live streams, all of those sort of things that give people a bird's eye view into what your business does, how they solve problems for other companies. And it's also going to give them a window into your personality. Right? So thought leadership gives us a chance as individual professionals inside of an organization or leaders inside of a business to really shine, to really show and highlight the things about us that make us different. And the things that make the staff of a B2B company different are really some of the unique selling propositions, right? So thought leadership gives the people in your company that are rising stars in your industry, that are really good at the job that they do, to really share their values, their experiences, their beliefs. And hopefully, if you've built a great team and you have a strong company culture, then those people reflect the brand itself. And then lastly, a lot of people ask me about social media for business to business. And I will say social media does have value in the B2B world. 75% of business to business buyers and 84% of C-suite executives use social media in some aspect for work. So that might be things like LinkedIn, it might be Facebook, it kind of depends on what industry you're in, might be Twitter. It depends on what industry you're in, which platform or platforms are going to be the most valuable. But I think the key thing to remember about social media is when you're in the business to business world, the buyers and customers that you're going after aren't using social media the same way that a B2C customer would, which is more personal, right? So B2B customers are often using social media for research at the beginning of their customer journey. So that's why with social media ad campaigns in the B2B world, we really try to focus on engagement and reach objectives, because what we're really trying to create is brand awareness for people who work in specific industries or work for specific companies or hold specific job titles, right? So we're not necessarily going to convert them right out the gate. And social media B2B conversion gets a little tricky, but making people aware of your business, what you offer, how you solve problems for different brands, that is entirely possible to do. Also, I think it's really valuable on social media to think about your customer service, how you can actually help the customers you already have faster, quicker, easier access to your help team or your support team, or to get their questions answered. And I also think social media is a great place to highlight customer stories, testimonials, case studies, all of those type of things that we know our B2B audiences are interested in, because one of their primary goals is to make an educated choice about the organization or company they hire. And then one last thing with social media is a lot of companies are tentative to have their employees involved from a personal perspective on social media. because a lot of times they're concerned, what if we have an employee that's disgruntled, that's unhappy, or things like that. So that's where I just want to like give you a little bit of a seed to plant, that it might not be every employee, but employee advocates on social media can really help your brand get more attention, especially if you're building a strong company culture where your employees reflect that culture and the employees are excited to be working there. We see that in social media, HubSpot shares that employee advocates on a personal level, when they're using their personal accounts, let's say on LinkedIn or Facebook, they can get over 8 times more engagement than your business pages. And so get the employees that you trust, that have been with you for a long time, involved in your social media strategy. Now, I want to turn and jump into our conversation here with Sarah Yerke. And Sarah, welcome. I'm so glad you're joining us today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Thanks, Sarah.
So we're just going to jump right into questions. And I want to invite everyone as we're going along. You have the Q&A. Please submit your questions there. I'll be paying attention while we're having this conversation. We should have time towards the end, but you can submit the questions anytime and we'll approach them. But I want to start first just by letting Sarah share a little bit about her job as the head business development specialist at JB Media Group and for the JB Media Institute. And Sarah, your job is focused mostly on B2B sales and relationships. And I think you and I both know a lot of people, when you talk about sales, or a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to deal with that. So
Yep.
what do you love about the job that you're doing from a business development and sales perspective?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I think for me, it was really somewhere along my career trajectory, like shifting that paradigm of how people typically perceive sales, right? And really shifting that into, I'm a helper, I'm a relationship builder. Like that's what I love at my core. I was reflecting on my family the other day, and like my mom's a nurse, my dad's a social worker, my brother's a counselor. And I also kind of fall into that like support of people role. Like that's my passion. And I've always loved helping people and helping them find, solutions to their business challenges is what I'm doing. It's not really sales in a typical sense. So I think it's really about shifting that paradigm and telling a different story to yourself about your role as a salesperson and looking at yourself as like a helpful guide. And it's also about building relationships and building that trust, which I know this, drop-in is kind of all centered around. And a part of that is really just listening. So as a counselor would, or as a social worker would, or as I would in my role, I'm really trying to just listen to what someone who reaches out to us is struggling with, and really listen to understand, not just listen to hear what they're saying and nod my head and like be buddy with them, but really listen to understand and help get to the core of their issues and really find authentic solutions to their problems. So that's what I really love about, I mean, you can call it sales, but I would really challenge, like, let's shift that paradigm and shift that terminology a little bit.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, because I think a lot of people, their aversion to sales is that it feels like you're supposed to be gimmicky or forcing people into things or selling them things they don't need, which is kind of a historical problem in our American culture. So I think that's where some of us, like you and I, are trying to defy that and say that's not what it's about. We don't have to do that. So I know with JB Media, and again, I'm working at JB Media Institute. You're working mostly at JB Media Group, the agency, but I think both of our sister brands, we've had a pretty strong company culture around relationship building and authenticity. And, especially for me as an educator, it's been really important that I have relationships with students where we can tell the truth, right? Not just say what we want to hear, but actually be strategic and tell the truth. So can you share a little bit about how you're really building that trust with the customers and the clients that you all already have at the agency?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, the base layer of that for building the trust for me anyway is really being fully transparent through the whole process. So, really at the front end, before we're signing any contracts or starting project work, is really ensuring that all the stakeholders, and so that includes like the people from the agency team that are actually doing the thing, doing the work, doing the email marketing, building the social media strategy, and all of the clients, whether that's the person in marketing, that's the client or the owner of the business. You know, we work with a lot of small businesses, so sometimes that is the owner and they're wearing all the hats, HR, everything. But making sure that all those stakeholders really have all of their questions answered before anything moves into action, and making sure there's a clear understanding of who's going to do what, and who's going to hold each kind of seat before we really dive in. I think that's so important to really building that trust. That way we don't get started and somebody's like, huh, you mean I'm responding to this piece of it, or I'm, so really go through your process. I would say for any business, go through that full kind of sales cycle into project process, and think about it with your team too, the people that are implementing the work, and think about where there have been little hiccups or maybe some friction in the past, and go ahead and like create a process around how you're going to answer that or overcome that friction from the very beginning. And that really builds a lot of trust, because people can trust that you're laying it all out there. I think another thing too, Sarah, is trusting when we're not the best fit, and not selling somebody something they don't need necessarily, and being completely transparent and honest and saying, this is not our wheelhouse. That word, I know that word is really overused, y'all, but just saying, this is not in our wheelhouse. We have a ton of awesome partners. A few of them are actually on the call, and we have a ton of great partners that we can refer these people to who would be better suited to serve their unique needs, because every agency and every kind of company has a niche, has a real area and focus of expertise. And so for us to take somebody on outside of that would not be doing them justice. It would not build good relationships with them or with the people they talk to. So that's another piece of it too.
Those are great points, because I think one of the unique things, again, that you and I have both done is sometimes when we're building trust with the potential client, then we pass it off to somebody else who does the work. Right. So, it's like you have to not just be representing yourself in that process of trust building, but you're representing multiple people. So I do the same thing with my programmer at Creative Original, right? A lot of times I'm selling the jobs, the clients know me, they trust me, but then it's Dan who's going to deliver some of those things at the end of the day. And I think that's a really important thing, like you said, to talk to the team, to really have that integration with the people you work with, so that handoff makes sense and so that everything is really clear. And I also love, again, going back to sort of honesty, when you're not a good fit, just taking ownership of that and saying, the next best thing I can do is try to help you find somebody that is, because then you're still building the trust, even if they don't become a client, and they leave that conversation feeling really positive. So can you tell us a little bit about with the team at JB Media Group, just like when we talk about the customer journey, what is that beginning point? Like, what are those first few steps you're taking? Is it something that you feel like you've really got clear, or is it more intuitive, or how are you kind of approaching people, especially when they're really new to the conversation?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sarah. And again, it goes back to building that relationship from the very beginning. One of the things that we do as a company, and I recommend for anyone, I guess it kind of depends on how the funnel's flowing, right? Like where your lead's coming in. For us, sometimes the first touch, if it's not a referral, is that someone will have found us through our website and they'll fill out an initial inquiry form. So they'll reach out to us through that. And over time, we've kind of iterated that form so that we're really getting a little more insight into fit. What are they looking for? Is that a fit for the services we offer? Also, as a B Corp certified agency, we're really looking for more beyond like, you have a social media need, we do social media, boom, it's a fit. We're more like, is this an ethical company within one of our niche verticals that we really feel values aligned with, in addition to we feel that we can help them level up. So really building that relationship, and a piece of that can kind of like become automated and take some of the work off the initial salesperson's plate, is have them fill out that questionnaire and tailor your questions so that you're learning more about their industry, their values. We added a question about pronouns, because I really want people to understand, like, that's something that we value. I want to call someone, their proper pronoun. So it's really kind of getting those questions answered right away. And I think, one of the biggest things too at that beginning stage is like, that first phone call is not a phone call where I am trying to close a deal. just like any great relationship, we want to court or kind of date that partner before we officially call them partner, And so scheduling that getting to know you call where I'm really going back to, listening, asking a lot of questions. I should be doing like maybe 20% of the talking. Hopefully, sometimes I get excited and talk more, but talking a lot less and listening more to that client and really beginning to understand what their need is and where they're having hiccups and where we can possibly help. And from there, it's really a team effort. As I said before, I think it's important to get everyone involved at all levels. And so we've created a process where after that phone call, if I'm feeling like there's something here, there's a spark, then the whole team who may be on that project reviews their website, take a first pass at that, reviews their social media platforms, let the team really get a feel for, there's potential here. Like we can work with this, or we already see some opportunities where we can like help out and get the full team excited. We might look at any thought leadership pieces. You mentioned that earlier. So that might be like a white paper or a TED talk that one of the founders did. We might dig into that to really get a deeper understanding of the prospect to really ensure that fit. And sometimes it's being truthful even at the beginning stage. If someone's saying, we want LinkedIn advertising, that's like what we want. Sometimes it's having that hard conversation and helping educate that prospect on, we've looked at the stuff and we feel like email marketing is going to be a better fit for you. And then doing some education through that as to why their budget would be better spent in a different way.
Yeah. And then I see a question from Heather about what are your thoughts on having people schedule their meetings like directly on the website? I know you're using some scheduling things for your meetings. A lot of them integrate with different websites. Do you feel like that's helpful? Is it difficult? How's that working?
I'll say this, Heather. I would say that would be a great tool as a secondary step after you've kind of done a little bit of pre-vetting to make sure they're even worth that meeting. I've had, before I kind of like iterated this system, this like process of how we're doing things, I was spending hours a week talking to people that I'm like, from the get-go, like from the time we got on the phone call, I'm like, this is not a fit. And I'm just going to have to listen. I'm just going to have to talk to them because I care. And I do want to help them in some way, but I may not be able to at all. And it's not a fit. So I'd say get that layer of vetting done first, have them fill out some information. And from there, you could automate. Great, you're a good fit. Now feel free to schedule yourself a meeting with me on my calendar through the website or however that looks. But I would recommend maybe doing a little pre-vetting first.
Yeah. And I would say too, if you are going to create situations where people can just book meetings without you kind of having any idea who they are, that's where I'm like, set it for like one afternoon every week that you're willing to do that. And then if you're getting booked up in advance, cool. But that way you don't end up like Sarah just mentioned, where a week where you've done like 8 meetings where you're like, all of these people were not a right fit for our company. It's like, yeah, I've definitely done the same thing with my sales process where I do have online booking, but I don't want to make that available directly up front as the first step, because then you'll get so many inquiries sometimes. And it's, it's a basic closing ratio, right? It's like, we really want to have something for them to go through first that qualifies their level of interest. I know on my website company, I do that with a creative inquiry as well, where it's like, if I know that you can't even answer like 3/4 of the questions in that inquiry, you're not ready for me. Right. And so I'm going to have to tell you, go get all this stuff and call me when you get it so that we don't spend an hour on the phone when I'm just going to discover that you're not ready for the project. So I agree with that wholeheartedly. So now I want to talk about the other end of the spectrum, which is, we've got some things that go on at the very beginning of the process. What happens once an organization or business is really a hot lead? Are there obstacles that you're running into? And how are you kind of approaching those obstacles to make that actual closing, signing of the contract, the deal happen?
I think the biggest obstacle for any salesperson in any industry across the board, and I talked to someone yesterday, a potential client who only does B2C, and it's the same obstacle for her. It was the same obstacle for her as well. And that is cost. I mean, that's always going to be it. And so, if that's something that comes up, we can kind of go back to the table and really help them prioritize those low-hanging fruit opportunities and possibly tear something out. We can discuss and educate more on the value of bringing an agency with really niche expertise. One person who's got really deep expertise in social media ads, or one person who's got really deep expertise in SEO, things like that. The value in that versus them trying to hire a part-time person for maybe the same amount of investment, where that one person may know like a little bit about a lot of things, but they're never going to have that deep expertise in one area where it's really going to help them level up. So we can kind of educate on like why the costs are this way and what kind of budget you should anticipate, and maybe they can fold that into their next fiscal budget. Or we can refer them, we can also make referrals to freelancers, or we can help them build their in-house team's capacity, provided they have someone in-house that can do it. So we can kind of hybridize it, where we're doing some of the work and we're training them on how to do it themselves. So there's lots of ways to kind of get around that, but education is kind of at the nucleus of all that. And I'd say that's another piece. Sometimes people don't understand digital marketing, as I know, Sarah, you talk about all the time, is always changing. Like, you're keeping up with it. And I mean, I got an email this morning from another agency that was like, we can't get this client into this client's Facebook business manager, and we're struggling and we're frustrated. And so there's other agencies reaching out to us. Thank you, Sarah, for answering that question. So sometimes it's education on just this world that we live in, industry terms. And even if your business is not digital marketing per se, there are industry terms within your business that you're focused on that you may just think it's just like in your vernacular, but sometimes your client or your prospect may need some additional education on what those terms mean, why they're important, how they integrate with one another and play with one another. We've actually created a glossary and an FAQ kind of landing page on the website to help answer some of those things. What's click-through rate? What's PPC? What's GDPR? There's like all these acronyms. So we have that resource to help prospects and clients educate themselves so they can really get familiar with what these terms are and why we're recommending certain things. So education, because they just don't know. And when you don't know something, you're not willing to spend money on it, and managing expectations, I think, is a big obstacle. Clients sometimes come to us with an obstacle. Well, our event's next week and we need to have 500 tickets sold for it. And you're like, okay, let's back up a little bit. Typically this type of thing is going to take you 5 months to get to this point. So it's again, education, but it's also managing expectations and helping them understand when they can begin to see results and what kind of investment it will take to begin to see results. So that can take, some of the steps in overcoming those beyond education is like just continuing the conversation, being willing to get on the phone with them again and spend time with them. And again, listen to the questions, listen to really understand, maybe walk through the proposal again and go through any terms they don't understand, talk through what they can expect then after the contract is signed, and really like paint that picture of what's going to happen. I think that makes people feel more comfortable. The same with like a kindergartner, first day of school, like kind of visualize, walk through like what's going to happen. Well, you're going to go in this big room and, help them walk through that visually, and helps them just have that trust in what you're doing, and helps them have a little more understanding themselves.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that, because I think especially, there is a big difference between working with medium and large companies where there's multiple employees and people who have different, more specific kind of roles to play, right? Their job is really defined. Whereas working with small businesses, a lot of times you might have a very small team or even one person who's the decision maker, and they're wearing so many hats. And so their ability to really understand like what the boundaries are, what the expectations should be, they really don't have all of that. Because I even see that in consulting a lot of times with people, especially smaller companies that are, let's say, teams of 3 or 5 or 10. It's like sometimes I have to have a little bit stronger conversation with them to say, hey, I realize you're busy, you have a lot on your plate, but we can't rush things that can't be rushed. We can't magically expect customers to do things that they just typically don't do. And to your point too, I think it's interesting that it's not just the technology in digital marketing that changes all the time. It's the literal behaviors
Mm,
of people
yeah. Yeah.
using the technology, whether they're B2C or B2B. Their behaviors are literally changing on a regular basis because new phones are coming out, new computers are coming out, new platforms are coming out. COVID happens, like all these things affect how people are approaching their technology, how their buying is being affected. Those behaviors are changing. So it's, in that world, we have to constantly, I think, be really, like I said, that trust comes from that honesty of being able to tell people, this part of what you think is going to happen, we don't feel confident that that can happen at this time because things are different than they were 6 months ago, or even a year or 2 years ago. Things have changed so much that we have to really recalibrate our expectation of the customers themselves.
Yeah.
So I'm curious also when you're dealing with, and I know you specifically work in digital marketing with a marketing agency most of the time, but what are some of the things that you wish your prospects knew that could make sort of your job easier? Or, things that you just know, steps that companies could take before they engage a B2B provider so that they're more prepared for those conversations? Because I do think you and I both have dealt with different companies who jump into a conversation and then the hard truth is, you're not at a point where you're ready to take this step. And here's what you'd have to do to take those steps. So what are some of the things you think people can do to prepare themselves?
That's a great question, Sarah. I think in some cases we can be kind of that helpful guide that once we get through the conversation and we can say, you're not ready yet, do X, Y, and Z. But I think it is important for businesses to do some of that legwork on their own beforehand, and even before they're like in the budget planning, So if they're in their budget planning and they're like, okay, we need this line item for marketing, or whatever it may be, but we'll just use marketing because that's what I know. Pardon me. Do some research on what that actually might take, and don't just slap like, we'll just call it $1,000, total for the year or whatever. Don't just do a little more background research on what should something like that on a national average or on a local average, what kind of investment are you looking for? Like, go ahead and build that budget out. Because that's often, like I said, the sticker shock or the budget conversation, it's always the hardest for a salesperson to have. And it's always maybe the overwhelm for the prospect too. So do some research on that first, plan and do some research around what the investment should be or is on a national level for certain services. So what does SEO cost? And SEO, it's so many different things, but like, what does SEO cost every month? Well, it could be, $1,000 investment every month. It could be a $4,000 investment every month, but it's certainly something. I think also prospective businesses should understand that they're also shopping for a partner. So they should be looking at more than one agency or more than interviewing or courting more than one vendor at a time to really get like a couple of different proposals back, compare those proposals, because again, not every agency is going to be fully like, we're not really good at this, but here's a cool person in town that is, so it's good for them to go ahead and do their own research on that as well. It takes work. And that's the thing. And then I think that doing some research on the services a particular vendor offers before reaching out to save themselves some time. We get a lot of inquiries around website development, which is something we don't do. And so I think it's just maybe we've been around, we have this legacy or like there's a word of mouth, lead that comes to us. And so oftentimes I'll have to refer people out to that too. So just doing a little upfront research. Choosing more than one prospect to kind of vet and really understanding what the budget investment should be kind of on a national level would be the three things.
Yeah, and I really agree with especially that part about really in exploring your options and doing a little bit of research beforehand. It's great when people send people to me because they just say, Sarah's awesome, call her. And I always appreciate that at a deep level, but I'm with you. Sometimes I get calls from people and it's like, they don't even really understand what I offer, and so I have to kind of be like, okay, well, actually, even though, yes, I am knowledgeable about that, that's not really the service I provide. And so, it's in some ways, I feel like when you're looking to hire any business to business company yourself as an organization or business, it's really important to look at their website, look at their portfolio, like do that little bit of research, maybe look at their LinkedIn or, read an article about them, like you said, or like watch a video about them, something of that nature. So you can really get a feel for who is this company? What type of people do they work with? Do I feel like it's something I want to participate in? Especially with my web design company, I run into that a lot where people come to me because of a referral and they didn't even look at my portfolio. So one of the first things I make them do is look at my portfolio, because if I'm not the style of designer that they want, then I'm not the right fit for them, right? But a lot of times they just wanted somebody to take it off their plate. So they were kind of just like, oh, so-and-so here, you can take this off my plate. And I'm like, well, not necessarily. Let's see if we're really got the same vision and same style. So I want to just invite everybody. We've got plenty of time left. So if there's questions, drop them in the Q&A or feel free to drop them in the chat. But one last question I wanted to talk about is, I know, Sarah, you're a lot like me. I still do a lot of my sales work in a very hands-on way, in a very personalized way. And, as the company grows, I have to deal with the fact that there's only one of me and there's only one of you. So, eventually you're like, all right, we have to be able to capitalize on these prospects without it taking so much time for each one, or we're not actually going to be bringing in enough closed deals. So what are some of the things that you are doing to, just going back to our earlier conversation, to automate things or to just make things more efficient for you personally as you're building these relationships? What are some of your favorite tools?
That's a great question. I kind of started out like you, like I've got a scratch sheet of paper and a pen, and I'm like trying to map everything out, but no, that doesn't work at a certain point. So really pausing to kind of think through my whole process and then laying out what systems I can put in place to really automate those was kind of the first step. Like, let me just lay in bed or meditate or sit at the couch and think through like the whole thing, and then see where I'm spending time on things that could be automated. And it iterates over time. It changes and it improves and it becomes different, with each quarter that passes. But one of the things I've done that's actually saved me time is that I've created like an email template that does have a link to that scheduling platform. Appointlet is what I use, but there's many out there, Calendly, et cetera. For scheduling that first call, it saves me tons of time because I'm not going back and forth like toggling to my Google Calendar and like toggling to the email like I used to do, like writing down 3 options, and then like bullet point. So I'm just like, find time on my calendar. I've blocked out what I need to block out for me and for my work. So the times that are there are open, and I know that. The other thing is that we have a pretty cool project management system called Asana. And that's where I'm putting all of my like first phone call notes, and the team can go in there and look and comment their thoughts and their feedback in that right there in that together. And it keeps a historical record of like our conversations and what their goals are and what the team had thought about our approach and what that might look like. So Asana is a great place to have like the whole team being able to look at one project and fully understand it. We also have a customized kind of CMS that's called Knack. And that's where I build out all of my scopes of work. And it's so helpful because it helps the team see how much time they have for a particular service, and they can weigh in on if that's enough or not based on what it's historically taking them. It ties all the work that we've done with a particular client together, and it also feeds into our invoicing system. So on the back end of it, once I'm done with my piece, it helps our accounts payable or accounts receivable person generate invoices from that system. So it's all there. I also use PandaDocs, and I do recommend like some kind of e-signature platform has really been helpful. When I first started, we were like printing out the contract and either faxing it or mailing it over to the client. They would print it out and then they would sign it, and then they would fax it back and we would print it out and put it in a file, so just from an ecological standpoint of like, let's think about our values of like cutting down on paper waste being one of them. the e-signature has really been helpful, and it turns things around faster. I've found people just get it and they sign it. I think somebody is on this call that they signed their contract before I'd even sent them the email that said sign the contract. So it's really fast. And then do I have time for one more?
Yeah.
One more tool. There's a cool new tool called Clockwise that we are using. And Clockwise is the jam. It connects to your, it connects to our Google Calendar. And so what Clockwise does is it looks at your calendar and it kind of looks for inefficiencies. If it's like, well, dang girl, you've got meetings, like little baby 1 hour meetings all spread throughout the week and you don't have any focus time. So it will like reorganize your meetings where it can and give you these blocks of like 2+ hours that they call focus time, and it blocks it off on your calendar automatically. It is awesome. And it also integrates with Asana. So when I have a task that I know is due like next Tuesday, I can schedule a Clockwise task for myself from the Asana task, and it will just plop it onto my calendar. So now I've got my like day, and I don't even have to think about it. It's awesome. It's awesome. Because for me, like if it's not written down, if it's not somewhere, it's not in my brain. Like I'll lose it and I'll drop a ball. So it's really good for people that have a lot going on and have a lot of balls in the air to keep me organized. So I like that one a lot. And I'm not
and
endorsed.
thank you for that.
Not endorsed by any of those.
I'm really excited to explore Clockwise because I've been reading the book Deep Work and how important it is to have blocks of time where you can do that deeper focused work. It's going to make you more creative. It's just going to help you get a lot more inspiration about things. So it feels like that's kind of what Clockwise is doing, is helping you block those periods of time out.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're right at the top of the hour. So if there's any questions, please feel free to go ahead and chat in and let me know. I do want to just let everyone know, like I said, I will share this recording by tomorrow along with my slide deck. But please keep the first Wednesday of every month on your calendar. Our next digital drop-in will be September 1st, and we're going to be talking about how public speaking can be a part of your marketing strategy. And we're going to have the amazing Barry Barton with us to share how you can craft a talk that is really successful and impactful and gets you the results that you want. And of course, if you're interested in any other digital marketing support, consulting, education, you can check out our free digital marketing toolkit and our classroom, the Content Strategy Roadmap, at contentstrategyroadmap.com. But I just want to say thank you all so much for joining us. And thank you, Sarah Yerke, so much for being here and sharing some of those insights and helping me just explain to everybody how sales can actually be a really satisfying thing to participate in, and building those relationships can be so powerful, and it can be the key to growth for any B2B company. So I really appreciate your time today.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Have a great rest of your afternoon. And we hope that we will see you at another digital drop-in soon.